Thank you for so much for joining me, Joe. And today, actually, I just want to, talk about intermittent fasting for women, who is for, who is not for, and also just ask your opinion and your suggestions for people who are wanting to try intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Sure.
but before we go, would like for you to introduce yourself. Some of my audience don't know you; they should know.
Totally understandable.
So, if you can talk about a little bit about you and your background, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Joe Klemczewski. I am the founder of the Diet Doc. And prior to that, if we want to go all the way back into my movement into the health industry, I was very interested in fitness and nutrition as a young kid. I wanted to lose weight and have a better physique and be a better athlete. By the time I was 12 years old, I was already lifting weights with very much an intentional purpose to get stronger, get leaner. My baseball goals were there. Those transitioned into bodybuilding as a sport. Back in the day when all we had were magazines like Muscle and Fitness and Flex magazine, the world of bodybuilding became kind of a soap opera to me. So I grew up, rooting for Lee Haney and people like that in that culture. And then I got involved in drug-free bodybuilding as a sport and organization. So I started promoting shows. I started writing for magazines. And all along the way, I started adjusting my education to match my personal career pursuits. So back in I guess it must have been the late 80s, early 90s, there wasn't much of a field for exercise science or nutrition. And so I went into physical therapy. Orthopedic physical therapy was as close as I thought I could get to really loving a career that had to do with physical medicine and health. And then very quickly, things started shifting, and I was able to do a master's degree in health and a doctorate in nutrition. And even back then, there was really nothing to do as an industry. So that was all just for self-actualization and fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a point in time where after owning a gym, after writing for bodybuilding and fitness magazines for a long time, the industry was exploding. I was working, I was the first guy to ever do online coaching as a business model.
Yes.
So I created the Diet Doc as a licensing program so that we could bring on tremendous professionals like you to use our systems and our curriculum to help coach people, general population clients who want to lose weight, athletes and physique sport athletes who want to look a certain way, perform a certain way. So we're about 15 years into that now. And along the way, I did a second doctorate in health education because at one point I thought I wanted to actually teach, leave this behind someday and just sit in a university and teach. Still might do that at some point. But then even moved into 2 more master's degrees in social sciences, kind of connected to the health sciences, but, just things that just drive me toward learning more. So that's my background. That's why I'm here with you discussing intermittent fasting and other forms of dieting. So I'm interested why you chose this topic. I think it's very trendy right now. A lot of people are talking about it, but not a lot of people know exactly what it is. So with the different forms of intermittent fasting, have you tried anything like that?
Yes, I have tried for about, it's been almost a year now. It started with just being an experience for myself, just to see how my body, for healthy related reasons as well. Thinking that I could just kind of give a break to my body, to my gut, to heal my gut. But after I start doing more and more, getting to more in the intermittent fasting, I started noticing some changes on my body, hormonal changes that wasn't like in a healthy way. So, and then I started doing some research about it. and just realize that it's not a really something a female should be doing every day. And it was something I didn't really recognize. I didn't know.
What kind of fasting were you doing? What was your eating schedule like?
I didn't do something like a very specific, but I was about, my fasting window was between 12 to 16 hours. So, but I was pushing and pushing to a point where even if I was hungry at 14 hours, I was like, okay, I still have 2 more hours. Let me just push. And I just started recognizing that my body actually was craving for nutrients. And that's why it's sending me the signal. I was like, okay, it's time for you to break the fast. But I was following a protocol of 16 hours or 12, trying to follow the 16, and was pushing myself to that point. And I noticed that I wasn't even hungry anymore. So my calories started decreasing by, not intentionally decreasing my macros, but because I was just not hungry. So my first meal I could not handle something very big, caloric dense wise, to feed my body for my first meal. Then my second meal will only be like snacks. And to get those calories, I would have to go more towards unhealthy or processed foods to get those carbohydrates and the fats and all that stuff. So I start recognizing that it's not something that a athlete should be actually doing to optimizing their performance, or for healthy reasons. Yes, I think, by no means, probably yes, but for an athlete and a bodybuilder or a power lifter or a CrossFitter, or even just someone who goes to the gym to try to become healthier, and to me, it was like, it wasn't not beneficial.
Yeah, I agree that you're outlining a couple scenarios where you can still use some of the principles of intermittent fasting and time restricted eating, but if you create a dogma around that, then you say, I must eat this way and never break those rules, then as an athlete, there are going to be some concessions. You're going to give up some things. And I know you specifically are a little bit of an ectomorph. I mean, you can get extremely lean. You like to stay close to a reasonable contest shape, and so you're probably a little bit on edge there anyway. You mentioned your endocrine system. You're always probably going to be on the edge of testosterone and other growth hormone factors being on the low side. So if you start pulling away large segments of time where you're just not eating, that is a risk. And, when you're lean and you're training hard. But what I would say is start with some of the principles. Instead of looking at this as a diet methodology that you must do exactly like some book tells you to do, think of some of these principles, because, going all the way back to when I was doing my first bit of graduate work, I remember taking a medical fasting class. And I talk about this quite a bit in conversations like this. And it was very enlightening and kind of interesting for me to see, wow, I can actually survive without food for a day, or I can skip a meal and I'm not losing tons of muscle. My first master's thesis was a 6-month self-case study on using not intermittent fasting, but just lower protein, where I reduced my protein down to 75 grams a day. And I was in a dieting phase, so I lost, I think, about 14 or 15 pounds. But even with restricting my food and protein to that level, I didn't lose any lean body mass. And that was my first start in seeing that maybe we don't have to eat like so many of the bodybuilding magazines and pop culture writers talk about. So for you, it might be that on some days when you're not training, you could say, this is going to be a day I intentionally eat less, I time restrict a little bit, maybe even fasting for a full 24 hours. I mean, that's a technique that can have some health benefits, but not when you're focused on performance, training hard that day. So what have you noticed? Have you switched back? You said you didn't feel very, optimal through that phase. What did you change back, and how do you feel now?
So now I'm to the transition of starting implementing like meals earlier in the day to start my day, not necessarily like upon waking up, because my body's too accustomed to not eating right after I wake up. But I wait like about like 2 hours and trying to make sure that I am training. When I'm training, I actually have food in my system, which I was not doing, right? Because my training was in the morning. So I was being fasted. And my mistake was the fact that I didn't immediately eat after my training. I would wait another 30 or like an hour or so, because my training was not designed, or my schedule, because my schedule it's not specific every day, so would not be aligned with my first meal of the day. So as you just mentioned, being an ectomorph, for me, I start seeing the loss of lean muscle mass. A lot. That was the cost. And it was in the beginning. In the beginning, I saw like an increase of lean muscle mass. I was like, oh, this is working. You know, getting a little leaner, stronger, mentally like focused. Some of those benefits that we see on intermittent fasting. But then for the long term, with this experience, I start seeing the decrease of lean muscle mass, which it was so hard, you know, for me to just kind of work towards. So now the transition is just start implementing a meal prior to my training, making sure going back to where I should be in the beginning, like making sure that I have at least 50% of my carbohydrates around my training schedule.
Yeah, so I think you ran up some great points, and I would love for everybody in your audience to understand that you have to first prioritize exactly what your biggest goals are, because everybody would just reflexively say, well, I want the most muscle I can, the greatest strength, but I also want to be as lean as I can. And those are polar opposite goals. You can't have all of that. You can be way on one end of the continuum or the other, or you can be somewhere in the middle, but you're never going to have the best of both. So here's a great example. I was talking to a friend of mine I saw over the weekend, and he's a lean, healthy athlete. You know, he may be 6 feet tall and 140 pounds. He loves to bike. He loves to run. And he likes intermittent fasting, even during training, because he said, you know, I feel more clear. I don't have the gut load. I don't have the insulin and carbohydrate lag with my blood sugar shifting. So his body is definitely more adapted to cardiovascular work or training while in a fasted state. And one of the studies that I read over the last couple months was that if you train that way in a fasted adapted state, or even a keto adapted state, your body can gradually get more efficient at using fat for energy. That doesn't mean that you're still going to be as strong or as healthy or have as much strength in short burst performance, but your body is at least adapting to use fat as energy with more stability. So if somebody like my friend said, I just, you know, I'm not trying to be, you know, the biggest, most muscular, strongest guy in the world. That's not his thing. He wants to be an athlete who feels great, and his health is a huge priority. So he's listened to all of the material on intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, and he's convinced that having fewer meals, and he uses the 8 and 16-hour window. So he'll have 3 or 4 meals, typically 3 in an 8-hour window. And he doesn't mind that his training is during that fasted state. You could do the same type of fasting window and just make sure that your training is inside of the fed state hours. So you don't, you know, I mean, don't train in the morning if you're not going to eat till noon. If your goal is to build muscle and strength, you might still get all the value of that intermittent fasting. You might feel great health-wise, but still achieve a better amount of strength and lean body mass retention if you're training where at least your workouts are supported by food.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, there are a lot of ways we can use these principles
Mm-hmm.
and still achieve our goals as long as we know how we're prioritizing those goals. I certainly would not feel my best, and I don't feel my best training in the morning, whether I'm fasted or fed. I prefer having a little bit more wake time and some energy. And so I like to train in the early afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
But
so basically you were saying that it's still, you can get the benefits, but for someone who is trying to, let's say, add some lean muscle mass, fasting would not be beneficial, correct?
Absolutely. If your goal is to add lean body mass, you should not be dieting,
Mm-hmm.
or at least not aggressively.
Mm-hmm.
You can achieve some good movement toward lean body mass gain and strength if you're only losing maybe a pound a month.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that means your goal is not dieting, but you can still at least not be gaining body fat.
Mm-hmm.
You can ride that edge. But I like to think of, even in your scenario, Andrea, is, maybe that 8-16 hour window is not perfect for you. Maybe you do need to eat in more of a 12-hour cycle instead of an 8-hour cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Or I should say 8-16. Yeah, that's what I was meaning,
Mm-hmm.
not 8-12. But you might even just push meals further apart and still get some of that fasting effect. I know as a culture, we've been inundated for so long about, eat every 2 hours, every 3 hours. And as soon as you're hungry, you've got to eat something. If you let your body kind of empty out your GI system, and even if you're eating in a 12-hour window, if you let yourself go for 4 or 5 hours or even 6 hours, you create an acute fasting state. And the value of that is you're using more body fat as energy in between meals, and you're making your body become accustomed to using body fat as energy more readily. So like I said, you can move up. The largest margin I saw in a study was, I think, 40%. People can start using body fat between meals at a 40% greater rate for activity if they're in that adapted state. So if you're just constantly shoving food in your mouth, eating 12 times a day, even if it's just a granola bar here, an apple there, it could be healthy food. If you're constantly doing that, you're training your body to use only carbs as energy and not rely on body fat.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's something that we try to teach our clients to just to train themselves. I don't know if that's specific, like the word I would say, like train themselves to like space out a little bit more their meals so they can start utilizing like the stored fat as energy source throughout the day, and to feel like actually to be okay to feel the hunger, because a lot of people, they're afraid to feel hungry. That's, I guess, is another topic. But so let's say in a scenario that someone is trying to put in the lean muscle mass, but not necessarily a lot of body fat, we're gonna do an increase on their calories, right? So let's say for the amount of carbohydrates they are using, because carbohydrates, as we know, that's what is going to help them to build the muscle, not necessarily the protein like everybody think. So breaking down that carbohydrate to 3 meals, for instance, should it be like, so breaking the fast, I think would be a good point for us to kind of discuss a little bit. What did you, like in a scenario like this, would you recommend a client of yours to break their fast so the insulin levels not going to spike to a point where like go up to the roof, but it's still getting the benefits of like the carbohydrates?
Yeah. So again, you have to really know your goals, and I love what you're positioning here as the variables, because if your goal is to gain lean body mass, then you really want some of the advantage of insulin. Insulin is one of the most powerful hormones to build muscle. So I'm not sure exactly what everybody is saying about breaking the fast in a daily fasting cycle, because in reality, that's not really much of a fast, even if you're not eating for 16 hours. I mean, if you're not eating for 3 full days, nothing but water, or 5 days or 7 days, that's a fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to worry about your GI system and reintroducing food. And that's where it's recommended to do things that are, not just functionally good for your GI system, but as you're saying, for insulin levels and all that. So if I'm looking at just my first meal of the day and I haven't eaten for 12 or 16 hours, I'm going to recommend whatever your goals are, stick to that. So like you just alluded to, if I don't want a massive insulin surge, then my first meal should be moderately, introducing carbs back into the day. So a solid protein source, moderate carbs, which my body can use, and I'm not going to create an immediate storage cycle. But if my goal is to gain lean body mass, that's a time to get that surge of insulin so that you're breaking the fast into an anabolic environment. You want your body to have everything it needs to synthesize, amino acids into the cells so that they're recovering better, and you can actually grow lean body mass thickness, the myofibrils in your muscle cells. So if I could be using intermittent fasting and still be trying to grow, but those meals are going to be bigger, and insulin is my friend. If I'm trying to use intermittent fasting for dieting, I'm going to moderate my carbs and use carbs strategically for my training. And so even if you're having a restricted amount of meals, doesn't mean you have to have carbs in every meal. I would say, like, let's say for somebody like you, and you just don't feel well not eating for 16 hours, but you still want some of these principles of better health, you could break your fast in the morning with something like a protein shake that has, vitamin powders and super green things in there, and maybe just a little bit of fruit, and make it something that's still very low carb, but has a lot of health kick to it. And then maybe not eat for another 4 hours. And like you said, that you're probably going to be hungry because, you still haven't eaten anything but that for 12 or 16 hours. But I love your point. If we view hunger as every time I feel a little hunger pang, I've got to eat, you're going to be obese. You're never going to meet your goals. You have to view hunger as a series of cues. So right now, for example, I have not eaten in 4 hours, and I'm feeling hungry. I'm not going to pass out. I'm not going to die. I got plenty of body fats. I could live for another couple of weeks without eating. So this first hunger pang is my body saying, hey, the stomach is empty, just letting you know, blood sugar's falling just a little bit, gastric emptying, is complete. I don't have to eat. I can, if I just move on with my day, that sensation goes away in minutes, and I might not feel anything for another 30 or 60 minutes. And then I might feel a bigger hunger pang because now my blood sugar is actually dropping, and I could feel symptoms like that. But I can choose to learn to read those symptoms and decide what I'm going to eat instead of just reacting to them.
That's a good point. Definitely. I think a lot of people, they are not just afraid of being hungry, but also they don't understand that having that spacing out their meals, it's going to benefit them to achieve their weight loss goal, right? If you started feeding yourself every single 2 to 3 hours, like you mentioned in the very beginning of our conversation, that it's like you're training your body to constantly just have it energy. I like to explain this way for my clients who doesn't understand terminologies, but you're constantly having outsourced energy instead of utilize your fourth thing, which is our body fat, right? So I think that's a great point. But also I want to just kind of clarify, if I'm not making a mistake, but for the first meal, if I go with a more a bulk of my bulk of carbohydrates on my first meal, that means like right after my workout, correct?
Mhm.
Like to get the benefits, not like a waking up and I'm not a training right now. I didn't train. And then I'm going to go and overload myself like with a fruit, like, I don't know, like those acai bowls. And then I'm going to have like
Mhm.
a crush in insulin, correct?
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is before the intermittent craze hit, but my work schedule changes a lot with my kids' schedule. So if
Mhm.
kids are in school, they're out of school in the summer, and who has to be driven here and who doesn't. So at one point, my schedule changed where I could get to my office at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and instead of my normal habit of just, waking up and shoving food in so I could get out the door, I just waited. I'm like, well, I can eat at work. And so I got in the habit, and I don't train in the mornings, usually, but I got in the habit of just going to work, getting into my day, get busy. And then I would look at, the clock and say, wow, it's 9 in the morning. I'm hungry. Now I'm ready for breakfast. And I really felt like my body utilized that because I've now had some activity level. I'm using calories. I've used some of what's in my bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
My body temperature's higher because, I didn't just wake up. So I think some of those things are very valuable. And I would have a small breakfast, like just maybe 4 egg whites and a couple pieces of toast or a bagel, making an egg sandwich. It wasn't like, 2 cups of oatmeal and 12 egg whites. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, I just need to ease into the day. And then since I was training later in the afternoon, maybe mid-afternoon, my meals, I might have another meal or two that got a little bit bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point of supporting your workouts, you don't necessarily need a ton of carbs, depends on your body type and metabolism. But, if you have a base of stability throughout the day, then a small amount just to trigger the energy you need for that workout can be very, very appropriate. So it could be something as small as 20 or 25 grams of carbs, even 15 grams of carbs, 15 or 20 minutes before the workout. But then also to your point, when you're looking to recover, if your goal is to build lean body mass and strength, post-workout is critical for protein and carbohydrates.
Thank you.
If your goal is to just lose body fat aggressively,
Mm-hmm.
you should still at least have protein after your workout and maybe delay carbs to the second post-workout meal so that you extend your body fat burning time a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, man, if you have any budget whatsoever for carbs in your day,
Mm-hmm.
having just enough to have the fuel for a good workout and then a larger amount post-workout, and this is all substantiated by research going back, beyond 20 years ago, that's when you get the most anabolic environment creation for recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some recent research where people saying, well, it doesn't have to be quite immediate. It could be maybe an hour or 2 hours or even in a 4-hour window. But man, if that's your goal and you've just disrupted muscle tissue with heavy, hard, intense training,
Mm-hmm.
feeding the muscle tissue right then is still going to be your best bet. That's where you're going to actualize your best goals for lean body mass strength.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that, because a lot of people has this, they get confused with pre and post workout, and sometimes they get too confused to a point where they focusing on that instead of focusing the daily calorie and macronutrients intake. So they go to the top of the scale, thinking about pre and post workout studying, just look at their calories first and then break down on those points. But I think for explaining that is very beneficial or crucial to have a post workout meal if you're trying to actually to build lean muscle mass, which a lot of my clients come to me to build lean muscle mass. They want to lose body fat, but they want to build lean muscle mass. And we need to understand that it's not a really you can't do both at the same time. If you're in a calorie deficit, you can't build lean muscle mass. So intermittent fasting, it's in my own experience, I saw the benefits of healthy benefits, but also hormonally for someone like me, not so for a long term, it wasn't beneficial, but also building the lean muscle mass I want with the bulk of how much calories I have to eat in a day, it is very difficult. So it's like, you know, to a point where you mentioned, like, we need to recognize what is the goal. It's to become healthy, losing body fat. Of course, I think it's more beneficial if you're trying to lose some weight than gaining weight for intermittent fasting, if you, in my own experience.
Yeah. And I think, you know, first of all, I want to make sure everybody is very clear that I don't support intermittent fasting as a methodology, but I do like that this content has permeated the culture a bit, and people are less reliant on thinking they have to eat around the clock, because you can create some of the benefits of this just by missing one meal a day like this. I know, for example, I have a very slow metabolism, and I'm just never going to lose that fast. The fastest I could ever lose is probably about a pound of body fat a week. And I have to structure my day to make sure I've got space between meals. And so I might just simply knock off a late night snack, and now I can start losing. Or like I said previously, during a schedule change, I would delay breakfast. That may move me down from eating 6 times a day to 5. Or I might intentionally say, okay, on non-workout days, I don't need that pre and post, so I can just kind of condense that to one snack. So now maybe I can get away with 4 meals in a day, and I've got bigger windows. But, you know, all of the business about not eating for a full 16 hours, and this is how your body, first of all, some of that research is just BS. Like when they say it's been proven that hormonally you will have more testosterone by fasting, total BS. Absolutely impossible, doesn't happen. But like I said, if your goal is losing body fat and becoming healthier, part of being healthier is actually having less testosterone levels. That's what increases your risk of heart disease, because red blood cells become stickier and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, all you have to do is start looking at your individual goals, decide where your meals fit best. I think, Andrea, maybe you have the same experience with clients, but the clients who seem to do the best always create a foundational mindset that my goal matters based on how, or my results are going to matter based on how I structure this, not how I feel. So I have clients who, almost with a Buddhist-like mentality, say, I don't mind suffering. I don't mind being hungry. I don't mind there being a cost to this. If you tell me that this is what I need to do, I'll do it. And those people just lose like clockwork, because when you create the structure like that you know is physiologically the best, your body will adjust. It will adapt. Just like that keto adaptation or fasting adaptation, your body gets better at transitioning into more body fat, insulin levels stabilize, you just feel better. And I think that's why some people get to the state where they say, now that I've been fasting, I feel so much better. Well, they didn't feel better instantly. I guarantee you that. You know, it took a process, and then their body adjusted. But if you always eat just based on how you feel and where your hunger patterns are, you're always going to be feeding chaos.
Yeah, you're totally like correct. You know, my clients, the ones who are very, very successful, they are very structured. You know, they have their structure, but they're flexible as well, right? With circumstances, things they want to eat, but not based on how they are feeling. Because I like right now, I'm hungry too, but I just ate like not a long time ago. I'm not going to be eating right now, because that's not with the purpose I wanted for myself. That's not I like to use the word aligned. It's not aligned with my goal. And I don't mind suffering, like you mentioned, because the suffering right now, what I'm feeling right now is not even close to how, if I choose to eat how I'm feeling, that's even worse, because then I will feel terrible about myself. Because I ate something that is not align with my goal. But so getting back to, well, we're kind of about to kind of, I guess, wrap up. But before we kind of go, I would like to ask you this: who should not be doing, actually, who should not be doing a fasting, like healthy wise, diabetics, people who has hypothyroid, or or low blood sugar, who are not for?
Yeah, very, very good point. I would say, first of all, if you have any medical condition like that, always bring in your primary care physician into the conversation and tell him or her that, hey, I'm ready to lose some weight. I know you probably think that's a good thing. I want to eat better. So, what do I need to be aware of in telling you what's happening? If I'm on, any kind of a glucose lowering medication, even if you're just a type 2 diabetic, or let's say you have a blood pressure lowering medication, your doctor might want you to monitor things a little bit closer and keep them informed and all that. But certainly, as you just said, something like diabetes, where you, especially type 1, where you can't let your blood sugar get too low, intermittent fasting is going to be literally death for you, potentially. So you need to always keep your health in check. And that doesn't mean that, reducing carbs or reducing meals, spreading them out, isn't beneficial. Absolutely, you have to consider your health and medical condition the number one priority. You brought up another good one, somebody with hypothyroidism. You already struggle with a, metabolic slowdown. Going long spans of time without eating is probably going to be detrimental and against your goals of having at least a normal metabolic rate, even if supported by medications like Synthroid. So, those are all the things you have to think through. And then, as I said, intermittent fasting or time restricted eating does not have to be a massive 16 or even 12-hour window. You can just choose how and where to put those meals. And like you said so perfectly, abide by a structure that will help you attain and align yourself to your goals, but you still have all kinds of room for flexibility. The whole house of cards doesn't fall down because you ate 30 minutes earlier or later, or you change this food for that food. You have tons of flexibility, but always rely on structure that makes it easier for you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that too. So basically, we always, and this is another thing too, I think we are all adults. We should know, always kind of consult our physicians if you are trying to, go on a keto diet, intermittent fasting diet. Always do your own research. And I think that at the end of the day, you have to actually think about it, if this is something you can sustain, right, for the rest of your life. And that's what here we are at the Diet Doc trying to help you with, is to create that sustainability, and that you create some structure, but it's something that you can sustain for the rest of your life without depriving yourself or following certain restricted rules where you are only allowed to do certain things.
Yeah, really good point, Andrea. And I always forget to mention that the fact that you, as a coach and nutrition consultant, that's part of our role with clients, is to help them navigate this stuff, figure out what's best, create some of that structure for them, so that they don't have to just guess and do all of this stuff without knowing with confidence that it's the right thing to do. So awesome that you're doing things like this. I always love watching your videos and all the things you're doing to help your clients. So my hat is off to you.
Thank you. It's always fun. So thank you so much for your time, Joe. I really appreciate it. Everything you do for us, for our company, and for your clients, and helping, and you helped me so much. So I don't know. I just want to say thank you.
I love it. I love helping, and you're a strong part of the Diet Doc, and always my pleasure.
Thank you. So, alrighty. If you guys have any questions, you can always put your comments below, and we will try to just get back to you to answer some of the questions. But if you want to know anything more about what we do, the Diet Doc, just go to thedietdoc.com and yeah, check it out, our website, some of our podcasts and articles, and our macro doc calculator.
Thanks, Andrea. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Have a great day.